What is up, fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Valley coming at you with Bleacher Reports and Hardwood Knox's Grant Hughes. We are back with more offseason report cards, this time for the Southwest Division. Before we cannonball into them, though, we have to ask. We need to ask. Grant, how are you doing since the 5 minutes ago that we last just spoke?
I'm really terrible. I just had an awful conversation for an hour. The host was a dick, and I don't want to bore you with it, but I really feel like a lesser person. No, I feel great. I'm excited. We are doing a new division, and I'm excited to hear you go in on at least two of these teams. So that's got my day looking really good right now.
Yes. And before we go there, as a brief reminder, we laid it out on the Central Division podcast, the full criteria, but a C is passing here. So that's not an insult. And even like a C minus, those are passing. So if you see C's, like, we're not being overly critical. And as Grant and I have mentioned time and time again, we are grading teams relative to the tools that were at their disposal and what they could have done. With that said, though, let's get to the offseason vitals of the Dallas Mavericks to kick off the Southwest Division. Notable moves. They acquired Christian Wood for Sterling Brown, Trey Burke, Marquise Chris, Boban Marjanovic, and the number 26 pick, which turned into Wendell Moore Jr. They signed Theo Pinson to a one-year deal. They signed Jaden Hardy, the number 37 pick, to a 3-year, $4.8 million deal. That was part of their mini MLE. They used the rest of the mini MLE on JaVale McGee for a 3-year. I have this as a $4.8 million deal in my notes. That is clearly wrong. A 3-year, $19 million deal with a 2024-2025 player option. And they also signed Tyler Dorsey to a 2-way contract. Notable exits, and I would say this is a pretty damn big notable exit. Jalen Brunson left for the Knicks on a 4-year, $104 million contract. Grant, what grade did you give the Dallas Mavericks for their offseason? And wait, I need to correct myself again. It was a 3-year, $17.2 million contract for JaVale McGee. If anyone doesn't believe me, there's a Google Doc with 1,200 words in it that I sent to Grant, and I have JaVale McGee listed as 3 years and $4.8 million. Please explain that one for me, Grant.
That would be a pretty good deal. My grade would be higher, I think. Marginally. So I gave Dallas a C minus, which is going to seem high based on consensus and based on what I know about you. I'll start with the good. The good is I think the Christian Wood trade makes sense. I think it feels like the kind of move that you're getting a very talented player that has mostly been on bad teams, who I think probably has had no small part in building a reputation as a guy that's kind of out for his numbers and maybe is not super helpful to a winner. I think playing in Dallas is really the first chance he's going to have with a few years under his belt to really like matter. And so I think there's a scenario, maybe it's just being optimistic. There's a scenario where he really helps them. Like, he becomes a second option that's like at least as good as Brunson, potentially, like a guy that just really scores it, really stretches the defense, really matters, takes the load off of Luka, which has been the issue forever there, in kind of a different way than getting like a true point guard or whatever. So I think there's upside there, and I think the price was totally reasonable to pay to get a player as talented as him. Maybe he kills their defense. Maybe it doesn't work. I like the gamble. So that's the good. The bad is kind of everything else, except another reason that the C minus is in there for me and not something worse is I don't feel like I have a handle yet on what exactly the circumstances were of Brunson's free agency. Now, you can certainly penalize the Mavs for the low ball, the extension stuff earlier, not getting it done sooner, maybe pissing him off. But at the same time, they had the opportunity to offer the 5th year and more money. I guess that didn't happen. I don't know if they got a real shot to make that offer. I heard reports either way. I think if that were the situation, if they just decided that we're not going over 104 million or whatever over any number of years, then that's a mistake and their grade needs to be in the D range. I just don't know that to be true. Maybe you can correct me. I don't know if you know that either. But so it's a C minus now, because I think losing Brunson hurts. If they lost him for the worst kind of reasons, which is just cheapness or whatever, that's bad. But I do think it's, Spencer Dinwiddie, I think, has played a bigger role in the past. He was actually pretty good, really good for stretches for Dallas last year.
Except when it mattered most, but please continue.
The loss of Brunson can sort of be backfilled, especially if Wood works, better than most think, or as well as maybe I think is possible. Just to sort of canvas the whole rest of the thing. The McGee signing, he's not going to close games. It feels like
them though, apparently.
Well, yeah, he'll be the ceremonial starter. That's fine. I just feel like that was a reaction to, man, we really can't defend the rim against the Warriors in the conference what was it? Conference finals? I can't even remember now. This was so long ago.
Conference finals.
So they had stretches where with Klebo as the lone big, like it just didn't work. And they're like, let's get a tall, rangy guy to block shots. Like he's not going to be on the court at the end of games. So you kind of just, I don't know, maybe you want to preserve Klebo during the year because he tends to break down. But like McGee doesn't make sense on this team, especially with Wood on the roster. So it's a C- for me. Knowing the particulars of the Brunson situation could move that down substantially.
So let me get to what I liked about Dallas's offseason, and we're done. No, I like the Christian Wood trade overall. I think people are too low on him, and I think we'll probably see him play better defense on a team that matters.
Yep.
I like the Jaden Hardy pick. The people and the contract, if he pans out, that's going to look really good for the Mavericks. And then you're going to get mad at Jaden Hardy's agent. Like that's how this whole thing works. The people that think he's going to play like a role as a ball handler in year one, if that needs to happen, first of all, trade Frank Ntilikina to a team that will actually use him then. But in all actuality, it's just, that's not a situation that you want to be in. So I like both. The Jaden Hardy pick seems like a good one. And the Christian Wood trade, I actually was supportive of that. I don't like the idea of him and JaVale McGee starting together, but one, that can change. And two, as you noted, like that's something that could be ceremonial and that you just stagger moving forward. I hate the JaVale McGee contract. I would have preferred why not Hassan Whiteside at the minimum?
Drummond.
Honestly,
why not Drummond at his number?
What's that?
Why not Drummond at his number?
Drummond at his number. DeAndre Jordan definitely. Why not Dwayne Dedmon even at the number you gave to JaVale McGee? So I hated that. And then a player option entering his age 37 season. What? And this is, someone mentioned this. I can't remember who it was. Was this a circumstance where this deal was already done and then they didn't know they were going to be able to get Christian Wood for the song that they acquired him for? And that's still ding them for, like, you can't even tamper correctly then at that point.
That doesn't make it better.
No, it doesn't. So I don't love the structure. Even if it was a team option, like I'd feel a little bit better about that. I also just don't love the player fit because now you have Wood and Dwight Powell, and you also have Maxi Kleber. So, and it's also just like every minute that you're playing with two bigs, like where Kleber's your four, Dorian Finney-Smith is not your four. And I think you unlock some of your best lineups where Finney-Smith and Bullock are on the court at the same time. But the big one here for me is the Jalen Brunson signing. So we know, per Mark Stein, that the Mavericks could have had him on that 4-year, $55.6 million extension twice. He was willing to sign it twice. They elected to keep their flexibility open for trades, which to me was always stupid because a player who is entering free agency, who also isn't making a shit ton of money, isn't going to help you a lot in trades because teams have to, one, factor in that they're going to pay him. And then two, he doesn't even work as like a salary matching tool because he was so cheap. He would have been inextricably more valuable on his next deal leading into or during next season. And the other thing was just that if you thought that was an overpay, did you not consider what the is going to happen to the cap climate as we're moving forward? And you were uncomfortable with paying Jalen Brunson an average annual value of what? That would have been like $17 million a year at 4 years and 55. That's terrible math. Was that $14 million a year, let's say? But you were totally comfortable giving JaVale McGee like $6. What? No, explain that to me. The other thing, and I think it's fair to ding them for that, even though the extension talks didn't happen over the offseason. And there were reports, and by reports, we know that Mark Cuban said that Dallas didn't really have a chance to present their deal to Brunson. Well, the reports were also that they were willing to go 5 years, $110 million. So they were basically willing to give Jalen Brunson about as much as over 5 as the Knicks gave him over 4.
Yeah.
And you're a team that can justify paying more because you have Luka Doncic already. And Brunson was really good. And when you look at this exact contract he signed, I don't think the Knicks should have signed him. But I think that's more about their organizational direction, the fit of the players around him, what I think is going to be their inability to create enough space so that he is as lethal inside the arc. But you could have paid him, and he is also, as of right now, projects as the 15th highest paid point guard in the league last year. I know you have next year. I know you have Luka Doncic. You were good enough, having just made a conference finals appearance. That was not a fluke. This was not the Blazers making the conference finals because of all those injuries. Yes, the Clippers weren't involved. The Nuggets weren't healthy, but you beat the fucking Suns and you embarrassed them in game 7 to not even have an offer that would have come close, or I don't want to say close, but like relatively respectable offer in comparison to what the Knicks were prepared to give him. Why did you value this player so lowly? And you have Luka Doncic. What is the plan here to get better? You don't have any blue chip prospects to trade at this point. This to me was an instance of you sign Jalen Brunson, and then if you want to move him, figure that out later, because his number where he would have been he's the 14th highest paid point guard, excuse me. If he was like around that number as well for Dallas, like you would have been able to move him eventually if you needed to. So I think that they deserve to be absolutely crucified for the way that they handled Jalen Brunson from the middle of the year right on through this situation. And if they didn't get a chance to present their deal, I guess that's like a feather in their cap. But what does that say that your own player who enjoyed the best basketball of his career this past season en route to the conference finals wouldn't even give you the time of day to present your deal? It says too much about how you handled him in the past or about what your offer was going to be. So I think it's fair. I said I like the Christian Wood trade, excuse me. That's like really the only bright spot for me of them this offseason.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not going to penalize them. Obviously, not signing him for $455 is asinine. Like that's a huge mistake. I'm not gonna penalize them for that because it's not technically the offseason. Maybe, and which is kind of like disingenuous because like obviously it affected how he felt about.
You're such a lawyer
in the offseason. I'm just saying, but
I let her up the rule.
if right, I'm just a rule follower. I'm just trying to follow some rules. If Dallas had the ability to go 5 for what was the most? Could they have gone like 120 something? 5 for like 130.
They could have maxed him out if they wanted to. I'm not saying like that was the right.
If they had the ability to pay him, because he's getting what 26 a year now.
So the Knicks front loaded it, but yeah, his average is out to about $26 million a year.
Average annual value of 26. If the Mavs had the ability to do 5 years at 29 per, just averaging it all out, or even 30, like. I think it is a huge, horrible mistake, and they deserve to have their grade, for me, lowered down probably to where you're at, which I don't know. Did you say what you gave them?
I gave them a D-.
D-.
I don't know if I said what I gave them. I gave them as a D-.
It was implied based on just, so I could get that low. I just still feel like it was just done. The whole Knicks thing was just done. And it may have been done the second that they didn't extend him earlier. But I don't know. There's too many, even though I know you laid it out. I feel like if it's the case that they could have given him 5 for, $29 million a year.
I don't know. So what is your like reticence that they couldn't have his max salary was like $37.5 million, right? 25% of the 150 cap. So
I just feel like I don't think they would have gone that high. I feel like there's just a bunch of bullshit on both sides. And I feel like the CAA and Knicks stuff makes it plausible that the 4-104 has been done for a long time. And
they hired his dad. I know he's a Rick Brunson. I know he's like worked in the league a bunch of times, especially under Tom Thibodeau before, but
right.
First of all, the audacity to not wait to hire him until like after this is all over. It's just mind melting.
Yeah. No, I'm sticking with my number because I have a sense that anything the Mavs could have done, it was like too late once the offseason hit. And I guess just because I'm just going to follow the rule that I don't know why.
Then why not win the press conference by throwing it, if it was done by going 5, just even including the 5th year at the same average annual value. So 5 years and $130 million.
Right. Yeah. It's almost, it's like unforgivable. If that was a real option and that could have, and he wasn't just, I'm already gone. I don't care what you offer.
It doesn't even, so they didn't even like win the.
They won nothing.
Yeah. They won no aspect of this.
Right. Agree.
That moves us to the Houston Rockets. Their notable moves include they drafted Jabari Smith Jr. at number 3. They drafted Tyree Eason at number 17. They traded Christian Wood to the Mavericks for Sterling Brown, Trey Burke, Marquise Chris, Boban Marjanovic, and the number 26 pick, which became Wendell Moore Jr. They also created a $3.9 million traded player exception as part of that. Grant, fun fact, did you know that as of right now, unless I'm completely wrong, which is possible, there's not a traded player exception in the league worth $10 million or more at the moment?
Wow.
Right?
Amazing.
I don't know who
make
cares
up
about that.
trades with all year.
Exactly. So they also, the Rockets, sorry for that little detour, they acquired Ty Washington, the number 29 pick, Minnie's 2025 and 2027 seconds, both unprotected, for the number 27 pick, which was Wendell Moore Jr. that they had gotten in the Mavericks trade. They signed Jae'Sean Tate to a 3-year, $22.1 million deal with a team option on the final season. They did that after declining his initial team option. They agreed to a buyout with John Wall. He gave back $6.5 million. They re-signed Bruno Fernando to an Exhibit 10 deal, and they signed Trevor Hudgens to a 2-way contract. Their notable exits include Trevlin, MVP of the Jalen Brunson League, Queen. He signed a 2-year deal with the Sixers. And then Dennis Schroeder, as of this recording, remains unsigned. What did you give the Rockets? And I bet the thing that I'm going to harp on is the move that you could not guess that I'm going to harp on.
Oh, now I'm intrigued. I gave the Rockets an A. This is one of my only flat A's, and just working big to small again. You could talk me into an A-. So working big to small, I think their draft, like, again, there's some component of luck. I think Smith was just the right guy for them. Had they been in sort of anywhere in the top 5, just like, I think he's the fit. So I like that. I like Eason and Washington. I think both of those guys make sense. Eason especially, I think, is pretty interesting. Getting the first for Wood, getting the Wall buyout, like, that's just, I just love, a little about me. I'm a big fan of just like getting rid of stuff. Like, so I'll go out in my garage and just like therapeutically, it's like, this has got to go. And it doesn't even matter. Like, I might need it in 6 months. I just want it gone because I feel like it complicates my life. I don't want a bunch of stuff. And moving on from John Wall is like, you have cleaned the garage out. Like, because I'm still there, but there's still time to trade him. You've just removed like this thing that doesn't fit, that's got to go eventually. You've done it. It sucks. You got to buy him out, whatever. And then the Jae'Sean deal. I think everyone's comparing it to the contract that Lou Dort got. Not fair. But just like, if the sticker shock of being like total value worth a quarter of what Dort is getting is very appealing to me, and for a sort of similar player. So just in terms of draft, like it. Free agency, I don't know, didn't really do anything, but getting rid of John Wall kind of counts. Trades, like the Wood trade. Signings, like the Tate signing. So just like, as I go down the list, there's not really anything other than not getting something great for Eric Gordon, which they can do at the deadline or whatever. I just kind of like everything they did. There aren't necessarily any home runs here unless you're really big on Smith. But everything just kind of worked, and based on the assets they had, the flexibility they created, I think they did about as well as they could realistically do. And I would love to hear what this move is that you hate so much.
No, love.
Oh, love so much. Great. Let's hear it.
So the only thing I really didn't like about their offseason was there's just like a lack of a pure, properly sized wing. Tari Eason is it, I would say. Jae'Sean Tate, a little smaller at 6'4". I know he can guard up, but I'm talking more of like the 3-and-D caliber. Eason is he their only option there? I mean, Jalen Green, not a wing. Josh Christopher, not really a wing. I guess Eric Gordon qualifies. They still have Sterling Brown and David Nwaba, but I would have liked to have seen them sort of reallocate some of their, like, they have these, they're like combo forwards or bigs where you're looking at a KJ Martin. And then like they just make the signing of Willie Cauley-Stein was weird, where it's like, well, why not? I'd rather you take a flyer on Yuta Watanabe at this point, something along those lines. So I dung them a little for that. This is all to say I gave them an A-.
Okay, good. I thought you were getting way down there. It's like, who cares if they don't have a wing? This team's trying to win like 14 games this year.
Well, still, like, just balance to the roster a little bit. As it is, though, like, they're going to have a hard time carving out playing time for all these guys. KJ Martin already requested a trade.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah,
you got to have some real. I envy the level of self-confidence that he has to ask for a trade off the team this bad.
Well, my spicy take would be like, if I were the Heat, I would trade my first-round pick this year for him.
Oh, interesting. Do you think that's what his value is around the league, or are you just like
no, not even. I think he probably would have been traded already if that was his value around the league. Also, one of the things that the Christian Wood trade, I wasn't super impressed with the value And people took that to mean, well, you didn't watch Christian Wood play this season. And I was like, no, I just thought that they were going to be able to get like a little bit more than a bottom 5 first for him. I think the untold value in that is just you open up a ton of minutes in your front court. Right. Alperen Şengün, Jabari Smith Jr., Usman Garuba should hopefully get some run this year. I also think I came away from Summer League lower than I was on Jabari Smith's offense and way higher on his defense.
That's the thing. He's not the kind of player he was necessarily billed as. And I mean, the defense was part of the package, but I think that's his path to like mattering as a rookie is defensively first.
I was asked for one of the mailbags that we did, I don't know, at this point, like a month ago, to give the hyperbolic like player comparison. And so I did hybrid melds. And I said Jabari Smith Jr.'s apex reminds me of like if Kevin Garnett had sex with Chris Middleton. Think about that outcome. The spawn.
Why do you have to get to your hybrid that way? Like, can't we just do it in a lab or something? Like,
okay, the spawn of like crossing the DNA of Kevin Garnett and Chris Middleton.
That sounds like a pretty good player.
I feel like he'll turn out all right.
Yeah, he might be good.
I think there were a couple Rockets fans that were mad I used Chris Middleton instead of Kevin Durant, but what are you going to do?
Right.
So the move that I loved, because I don't really have anything to add to what you said, other than I think this was just I like Eason. I even like Ty Washington. Mm-hmm. I think if they're willing to not invest so much equity, and I'm not as high on Kevin Porter Jr. as everybody. I'd like to see what Ty Washington could do in some of the floor general minutes, or even as the microwave guy off the bench, but not as the microwave guy, more as the Tyus Jones of the bench than the Kevin Porter Jr. But when you look at that deal they made with the Timberwolves, and I triple checked this, so unless I still have something wrong, you traded number 26 for 29 and then 2 Minnesota seconds that are unprotected in 25 and 27 when we're not even sure that Minnesota is going to be really good. What a trade. I'm sorry. That was an incredible trade by the Rockets. Like, I think Ty Washington, he's small, but he plays so much bigger to me on the defensive end. I was like, going through the details of that trade, I was just in awe. And so I liked pretty much everything about their offseason. I would have liked to have seen like more of a wing emphasis where it's not who is the best pure wing on this team. Yeah. It's probably Eason. I probably want someone a little bit more veteran than that, who's not Eric Gordon, who's bigger than Eric Gordon, who's bigger than Jayshawn Tate, who's not Sterling Brown, who's not David Nwaba. It's too hodgepodge is all. But I gave them an A-.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, really, worst case on that, I love that you got so deep in the weeds. You're praising a trade that brought back 2 seconds. But at worst, that's 2 free seconds. Because the difference between 26 and 29 is just like, I mean, who cares, right? Like, it just doesn't make, there's nothing. You're getting, maybe those picks are in the 50s if everything works, but maybe they're in the 30s. Like,
I thought it was a really good, probably at the time it looked better because the Gobert trade had not happened at that point, I believe, right? That happened post-draft. Yes, it happened right before. Yeah, it happened in July. What is time anyway? So like it probably looked a lot better. Yeah. But like just who's to say the track record suggests that Minnesota might not be elite. And so that 2027 second, we're talking about an older Rudy Gobert. That might be his free agent. Like after he's a free agent in
4 years.
He picks up his player option. He will be a free agent in 26. So it's the year after that. So I just thought that was just this small trade that made a lot of sense. So A- for me on the Rockets.
All right. That's what the people come for. That level of detail.
The Memphis Grizzlies, notable moves include they signed Tyus Jones to a 2-year, $29 million deal. They signed John Morant to a 5-year designated rookie extension, $192.9 million. It will be 30% of the cap if he makes all NBA. That could escalate to then $231 million, I believe is the number we settled on. Yeah, $231 million as of now with the cap projections. They acquired point guard Kennedy Chandler, number 38, from the Spurs for the Lakers' 2024 second-round pick and $1 million in cash. They then signed Kennedy Chandler to a 2-year contract. They signed Coach Taylor Jenkins to a 2-year contract extension. They acquired Jake LaRavia, the number 19 pick, for Walker Kessler, the number 22 pick, and Ty Washington, number 29. So they traded 22 and 29 for number 19. They acquired David Roddy, number 23, and Danny Green from the Sixers for DeAnthony Melton, who had 2 years, $16.3 million left on his deal. They signed John Conchar to a 3-year, $19 million extension, fully guaranteed. They drafted Vincent Williams Jr. at number 47 and then signed him to a 2-way contract. And they signed Kenny Lofton to a 2-way contract. Notable exits: Jared Culver remains unsigned. They waived Tyrell Terry, and Kyle Anderson signed with the Minnesota Timberwolves. Grant, what grade did you give the Memphis Grizzlies?
So I gave him a flat C. And I think a lot of that, again, going big to small, like there was never really any doubt, but getting Morant locked down, great. I think, and normally you'd say, well, it's awesome because they did it a straight 5. There's no player option. I'm pretty sure. I think you said that. So like you've got your cornerstone. Of course, like there aren't a lot of guys his age that are as accomplished as him that are scarier to be committed to long term just because of the injury risk and what's already happened injury wise. And style of play obviously contributing to that, but whatever. That's all hypothetical. The other thing I really loved that they did was getting back. I feel like we spent a lot of this season talking about how, like, man, somebody is going to pay Tyus Jones because there just aren't any point guards. Like, you know, the Knicks are going to give him $20 million a year, or like what, you know, just it seemed like there was a chance where he was going to be among the most sought after players, like full stop, and certainly among the most sought after point guards. So getting him back for 2 years at like reasonable money, especially since, like, if last year's any indication, he's going to start a whole bunch of games for them. So like that works for me. Then to the stuff I'm not as much of a fan of, losing Melton, I think hurts. And you sort of, I assume when we get there, we're going to look at what the Sixers did in the offseason and say, like, God, they got Melton for what? Like, he's going to maybe close games for them, or at least be a for sure rotation guy. So if you're going to think that way, you have to look at what the Grizzlies did in giving him up for Danny Green, who I assume is not going to play for the vast majority of the season, if at all, ever. I just, and that 23 pick, I don't know. That doesn't really do it for me. Losing Kyle Anderson for nothing. Reasonable minds could disagree on how useful he is, especially going forward. But now that Jaren Jackson's going to miss a bunch of time, maybe Kyle Anderson was going to matter a little more in your rotation. I don't know. It evens out for me. The thing that I think maybe some people will fault the Grizzlies for that I don't necessarily is we came into this offseason with, like, watch out because Memphis has potential to do something with cap space, and they're going to need to do it now because Morant's big number will hit down the line and your cap space won't be there. They got all these picks. They're just like, watch out for them as a big, and they didn't do anything consequential, which I think, looking at how far they advanced last year and the uncertainty surrounding Morant, like staying healthy, it kind of might have been time to do something if you're really aggressive minded about, like, we got to jump through this window because it's open a crack and that might be all the wider it ever is open. I'm still not going to penalize them because they just still have a ton of talent. Like, I think it's okay to be a little more deliberate. It does suck to lose two guys that, were helpful for a return that I didn't like a ton, talking about Melton and Anderson. So it's just an average grade. It's kind of a cop out. I am receptive to people being lower than that, though.
Yeah. So I gave them a C-. So I was right in lockstep with you. The bulk of this grade is because they signed John Morant to that extension and there's no player options. So that gives them the ultimate control over his future and their own, really, there then too. I did not like, and I like the Tyus Jones deal. Just, it's a 2-year deal. If you think it's a slight overpay at almost $15 million a year, just whatever. That's, the cap is going up and he was incredibly, doesn't turn the ball over.
Yeah.
If he's hitting enough of his threes and then just the defensive peskiness he gives you, that's quality game managing from him. And just based off some of the time Morant has missed over the past few years, you're going to need to use him, which is also why I was kind of like, oh, you just gave Anthony Melton away. You could still fold Danny Green's salary into a different trade. He would help you if he was going to be healthy, but we don't know if he would be ready at all this season. And so I think what makes me most uncomfortable about their offseason, it's not even that they didn't take a big swing, because who are they taking a big swing on? Who would you have liked them to sign in free agency? That's part of all this. But they are banking, to me, way too much on not just internal development, but some of the new, like the new rookies making an impact right away. Like, I enjoy the idea of, could David Roddy be like sort of this undersized big for them who's stretching the floor based off how many of his threes he hit during his final season at Colorado State? I mean, maybe, but he's also 6'5", and he had shot under 28% from three through his first 2 seasons at Colorado State. His free throw percentage actually dipped below 70% in his 3rd season at Colorado State, while he was hitting 43.8% of his threes. This is all sort of happening on not negligible volume, but it wasn't super high volume either. So are you banking on him and LaRavia to make these impacts right away? Or are you banking on not Desmond Bane to be only as good as he was last year, even better? And then now became very high on Zaire Williams, but you've kind of decided with what you did this offseason that he's just ready to me. And that's also, this is happening with Jaren Jackson Jr. is probably going to miss some time to start the season based off the timeline for his return. And so to not diversify the front court rotation a little bit more, especially knowing, look, I know Steven Adams wasn't played off the floor the entire playoffs, but like knowing the issue it became against the Timberwolves, it probably would have made more sense to me to go after someone who wasn't like just more diverse than Adams or Xavier Tillman or Brandon Clark. And knowing that Jaren Jackson Jr. has dealt with injuries now in the past and is currently dealing with one, I feel like last season was not a flash in the pan. And I've also been lower on the Grizzlies for 3 years running than consensus. And they've just made me look like a fucking idiot each and every time. So maybe this will happen for a 4th year running, but they're not, I don't look at them and say, well, they're a team that's going to contend for the second best record in the NBA again. You have the Clippers who are going to be healthier. The Nuggets should be healthier. The Pelicans should be healthier. The Wolves got better. What if the Lakers just don't suck? Portland should be healthier, and they have an interesting team. I see a scenario where Memphis is not guaranteed one of those top 6 spots in the West. I'm not even sure if we went through it right now off the cuff, and I don't want to do it because I'll piss people off. I don't know that I would have them in my top 6 just yet. And I'm not saying that they should have been more aggressive then in trying to make a win now trade, but like something along the lines of getting rid of DeAnthony Melton, was that 100% necessary or even safe? And could you also have done something it's very much hypocritical of me to say all this and then not have names that are standing out, but like you couldn't have been the team that, because you had your mid-level, like couldn't have taken a look at Isaiah Hartenstein to diversify your front court rotation. I know you have a lot invested in Jaren Jackson Jr. and Steven Adams. Adams is entering an expiring contract. And if not that, like you're definitely a team that I think could have stepped on the toes of some of these, wing debates. Like why weren't you, I would have loved to have seen them attached to either of the Martin twins, would have worked for them. They weren't even they weren't linked to Otto Porter Jr. Maybe he's more 4 than wing. That's fine too. Even wouldn't bringing back Kyle Anderson have made some sense, especially with this Jaren Jackson Jr. injury? I know he doesn't space your floor, but he gives you some ball handling in the front court as well. I'm just not I'm not on board with them being this trusting or having this much faith in their ability to, I guess, not even just develop, but it seems like have at least one of their primary rookies, make an impact. I mean, even just something why weren't you even couldn't you combine youth and flyer and inexperience with some entrenchment? Amir Coffey is just my example here. Mm-hmm. He signed a 3-year, $11 million deal with the Clippers. Not terribly experienced, but just having a secondary wing type guy that can already play, rather than hedging so many of your, so much of your immediacy to what are still bets, because Desmond Bane is only in his 3rd year. Zaire Williams is a sophomore. John Morant is really good, but how many games might John Morant miss? And yet you still get rid of Melton. I think there's a chance this team could be just as good, if not a little better, and maybe they wind up winning fewer games. I just feel like the likelihood of them actually being better than they were last season, throw win-loss record standing in the West out the window, I just feel like it's lower than it should be after going through this offseason.
I agree with that. I think there's 2 guys that I think a ton is riding on, and Williams, you mentioned, because even if it does feel like they're pretty comfortable with him being ready, but ready in this case means not just now, but this is the guy that when Jackson is back, and we're talking maybe even 2-3 years from now, Bane and Williams, it's a conversation between who is our 3rd most important player, assuming Jackson is healthy and continues on, at some point marries a high 3-point percentage with all the shot blocking and defense. He hasn't quite put that full season together. I don't know if Williams is that good. I think it's a possibility. I don't think he's going to be better than a solid starter this year, right? That would be very impressive. And then Brandon Clark's the other guy, because now no Anderson, Jackson's out. He's kind of the only guy that, I don't know, maybe Roddy is going to be that trustworthy, but if Jackson is getting major minutes, you're losing the stretch that Jackson gave you, at least in theory. It's a hard combination with Steven Adams, and I think maybe there's gonna be a lot of minutes there. Maybe Clark plays a lot more center, and I don't know. So he's got a suddenly much more important role. And this is someone that like has never really felt like a core, like, you know, I think he's extension eligible, and it doesn't seem like anything is in a rush to get done on that front. So those two guys, Williams and Clark, are in like maybe a little more important roles than they ought to be. I don't know. I just think it might not even be their fault, but that the rest of the West got better. But I agree that like there's a scenario where Memphis is like a 50-win team, and they're fighting for, you know, the 7th spot or something like that, or, you know, the 6th spot. But also like the downsides are real because
the combustibility, yeah, for sure.
Because think of like how they've handled Jackson injuries in the past. Like the torn meniscus kept them out for like longer than anyone's ever been out with a torn meniscus. And just add this injury to the pile. Like that's the more you get, the worse it is. And what are the odds they win as many games they do as they did last year when Morant misses his 20 games or however many it is? Like they're not going to do that. They're not going to do the 18-2 or whatever it ended up being at its high point, as good as Jones is. So yeah, the downside risk is very real, and moving Melton does not mitigate that risk. That exacerbates the risk because you're just thinner at a position that was already tough. So yeah, I still go and C, but yeah, I feel the C- for sure. I can respect that.
The John Morant contract really saved them, and I do like the idea of Roddy and even Laravia a little bit too. Just it feels like maybe one of them can't be brought along as slowly as maybe they need to be. But this could be a flex by the Grizzlies that works out. We'll have to see. The next team, this is a really easy team because they didn't do much. The New Orleans Pelicans, their notable moves include drafting Dyson Daniels at number 8. They drafted EJ Liddell at number 41. He did tear his ACL though. Then they signed Zion Williamson to a 5-year designated rookie extension, $192.9 million. It can be as much as $231 million if he makes an All-NBA team. There are protections on a year-to-year basis. I have yet to see, hear, read about what the specific like dollar amount protections are, but there apparently is a clause in his contract that his weight and body fat percentage must total under 295. I don't know how often that's going to be checked. I don't know if there's an injury forgiveness there to where is it realistic to expect him to keep his weight and body fat percentage down if he's injured and can't work out at full bore. But that is they signed Zion Williamson, and he is there's no player option in that either, by the way. So that's huge for them. And then their only notable exit, and I'll put exit in air quotes, is that Tony Snell remains unsigned at the moment. So Grant, what did you give the Pelicans?
So if I could give an incomplete, I would, just because I want to know everything about the language in Zion's contract. I'm giving him a B. And if someone gave him a flat A, because like, hey, the biggest question mark hanging over this franchise, which was, is Zion going to stay? Even though we've seen players ask out with years left on their contracts, that's a thing. You've got him under contract. So that's big. Like you've eliminated the big uncertainty, the big like speculation, the point of speculation that has been hanging around for like 2 years now. That's big. I don't have a strong opinion on Dyson Daniels yet. I think he's someone who, because EJ Liddell's hurt, but Daniels is someone who I think could swing the grade like a full letter, depending on what you think about him. I like the idea of him. I just, maybe he'll be the latest to get his shot fixed up, and then suddenly he's like a versatile defender who has great court sense and can move the ball, and he's a wing, and that's super valuable. Don't know yet. We'll see. I guess I'd say if Williamson meets that 295 weight plus body fat percentage, like if he, because that's like, I mean, I don't know what he was walking around at for even in his healthy year, but it can't have been much less than like 285. I don't think. He's going to be pretty, like he's going to be a monster if he meets that criteria, which feels like a tough bar to meet for him. Not knowing exactly what he weighed, but just kind of eyeballing it. I think the upside's massive. This could just be an A if Zion is fully healthy and meets all the criteria and is great, because B would look ridiculous because they lock down a guy who suddenly is like maybe a top 10 player, as soon as next year. I don't know. But I just don't know enough to go any higher than a B right now.
Yeah, you're a Debbie Downer here, man. I went A-, so not terribly higher than yours. I think I'll start with the only thing that you could really quibble over, and I think I'm in the minority with this. I would have been more proactive in diversifying the front court around Zion already. I don't want to see Jackson Hayes, Jonas Valanciunas get a ton of minutes. And I don't think that they're going to trust the Larry Nance Jr., Zion Williamson lineups up front enough. And I definitely don't think they're going to trust like Herb Jones, Trey Murphy, Zion front line with maybe Ingram and McCollum go point guardless. I want to see them. I don't know how much of a staple they're going to be. I would have been more proactive addressing that. At the same time, they didn't use their mid-level. I don't know who they were going to spend it on when you look at how deep this roster is right now. And even knowing like, hey, they're going to get Kyra Lewis back. And I think Dyson Daniels should actually play. I'm in love with that pick, by the way. Everything you mentioned, plus I'm going to cake in his potential getting to work with Fred Vincent, where it's like, if you have Fred Vincent and Chip Engelland, like as your shooting coaches, one of those two, they could be a shot doctor. And so I think that he has the potential to hit more of his jumpers than he did while he was at school. And I liked the fact that they have Zion under team control for 5 years. And even if it's loosely protected, sort of like the Joel Embiid contract, where his career would have essentially needed to end for the Pelicans to be washed of his money, like that doesn't really actually matter, because even if you like, what changes if you take Zion Williamson off this team because of injuries? They suck. So you're not going to need the money anyway. And so if the fact that you just have him under team control for that long, we know what he is at his peak as a sophomore. That was an all NBA player. Like that was just the way he was playing. He was an all NBA player. So I think that's a home run for them. Like I said, and I think Dyson Daniels was the right pick. I was very intrigued by EJ Liddell. And I thought that, is this like another sort of just value they found? This is a team for me that I've said it, and I don't think I'm getting ready to say some pretty recklessly optimistic things about the Pelicans. I think I've said them already. So I might just be a lot higher on them. It was just an A- for me, and I would have been more aggressive I'm not saying they needed to go out and get Miles Turner, but was there a way to just make different moves? And like, even if it was a Chris Boucher instead of having Jackson Hayes on this roster, I'm not saying that exact player, that scale of a move, I think is going to better serve them, to me, long-term than trying to get Zion to work with either Jackson Hayes or Jonas Valanciunas. And yes, Pelicans fans, I know that Jonas Valanciunas takes threes. I'm very much aware that is a thing.
Yeah, you can't bring up. I wish they just had a little more stretch without that. No. The greatest up faker in the world currently does take what, 2-3 a game, something like that. I don't know. I think my favorite offseason trade that I used a million times, which in hindsight now seems ridiculous, was like Jackson Hayes and Devontae Graham and 8 to the Pistons for Jeremy Grant, which would have blown away the offer that Pistons got for Grant ultimately, because I just like the idea of Jeremy Grant in the closing 5 on this team. That sort of moves the logjam or clears the logjam by getting rid of Hayes. But that turned out that would have been a significant overpay, giving up 8. So back just on Zion real quick, because I do feel like an asshole for just looking at the downside of this. I think I am anchored to the idea of, I remember seeing him at Duke, like before, I think he'd already had one knee injury, but and then athletically thinking like, this guy is the greatest athlete like we've ever seen. This is like Lawrence Taylor. This is just like, he's a different level. And then even before, then he missed a chunk of his rookie year, and coming back, it just never was there. And I just decided then that like, with the weight issues and the conditioning issues and the injuries piling up, we've already seen like the best of this guy. Now that looked real bad when he was putting up 27 on 61% shooting, but then he got hurt again. And so I'm still anchored. I'm just, the pessimistic side of this to me is like, there is a legit world where 2 years from now, the worst happens and we're thinking like, can you fucking believe they gave a 5-year deal to this guy? And now the protections could change that, but we just don't really know what the dollar amounts are. There's just a scenario where I can imagine us talking like, man, that was really one of the worst max contracts given out, considering all of the time he's missed and the unique weight issues for a player this athletic too. It's like, it's just, there's a lot of uncertainty.
What makes this so different from the Joel Embiid stuff then, though?
Not a lot. Like, that's the thing. That's the upside. But like you said, like there was a way that the Sixers were just going to get out from under like all of that. If I knew that about this deal, then great. Like then I would feel much better.
I would imagine it has to be the same, but you're basically only getting out from under if his career is over. And my point was, though, is does it matter how much money you're paying him if whether you're saving that? Yes, financially, sure. Like, yeah. I get it. But if you have Zion Williamson as a max number that's not contributing or is less than a max player, if you just removed him from the books and then removed his money, you're in the same spot functionally.
See, I feel differently because I think what the Pelicans started to do last year suggests that, like, bring that team back. It say Zion doesn't play. I'm still looking at them as like they might be a top 16. Like I'd give them nearly as good a shot as Memphis to like be in the mix for one of the 5, 6, 7, 8 range of a playoff.
Are they trying to be the Kings though? Like,
well, no,
that's not the angle.
First of all, that's the Kings are trying to finish. Well, by the way, if the Kings can't get in the play-in this year, because there's like 4 other teams in the West that are not going to try. And I have them as one of them, but we'll get that later. No, I think Zion is the piece that you added to the roster they had last year. And it's like, well, shit, like this team is a threat to anybody. Like they could really, their ceiling is super high. So I think I think that makes it more dangerous because you're taking that ceiling down. They're still pretty good. And you're like just regretting. I don't know. I'm talking myself way too far down on the Zion deal. It's a small market team that locked up a number 1 pick that wasn't a lock to want to stay. So I should shut up and just
look. The other thing is just my whole point is that yes, presumably if everything goes disastrous with Zion and you're still paying him, you're tearing it down whether you're paying him or not because of everything you just said. That your ceiling is without Zion Williamson being 2020, 2021 Zion Williamson. What is your pathway to title contention? It's stripping it down and starting over.
Right. Yeah. You don't have it unless there is no unless. You don't have it. You don't have it. Ingram's not the guy, even if he gets.
I'm gonna put you for an A++++.
You have to leave me as a B. I can't get away from my Zion fears.
The final team in the Southwest Division, the San Antonio Spurs. Notable moves include they traded DeJounte Murray and Jock Landale to the Hawks for Danilo Gallinari, who they waived. Charlotte's 2023 first. It's top 16 protected next year, then lottery protected the following 2 seasons before. Does that just extinguish or does it become 2 seconds? I should really look that up. But that's the protections on it. They also acquired Atlanta's 2025 first-round pick, unprotected. They have swap rights with Atlanta in 26, unprotected, and then Atlanta's 2027 first-round pick, unprotected. They drafted Jeremy Sohan at number 9, drafted Malachi Branham at number 20, drafted Blake Wesley at number 25. They signed Keldon Johnson to a 4-year, $74 million extension. There's $1.5 million per year in unlikely incentives. That could bring that up to a 4-year, $80 million deal. They claimed Isaiah Roby off waivers. And they traded the number 38 pick, which was Kennedy Chandler, to the Grizzlies for the Lakers' 2024 second-round pick and $1 million in cash. Should I go in depth on why I like that Kennedy Chandler trade? Because who knows what the Lakers look like in 2024? That could be a number 31 pick.
No, we agree on that.
And then they're notable. Oh, they signed Dominic Barlow to a 2-way contract and signed Jordan Hall to a 2-way contract. Notable exits, aside from Murray, obviously, Lonnie Walker IV signed with the Lakers. Grant, what did you give the Spurs?
This is a flat A. I'm not giving A+. This is as high as I go. The only way I could imagine someone, maybe you'll prove me wrong, thinking this is anything less than like an A- is if you just really can't get over not having Lonnie Walker back for another year to like tantalize for a minute and then be bad for 3 weeks. The Murray trade, like I get it. It sucks if you're a Spurs fan on some fronts because like this is your best player. He's coming off just a ridiculous season. Probably if you're only a fantasy player, you're like, how could they possibly trade this guy? But to do it at the right time, because the logic of an extension didn't make sense. So he was going to get to unrestricted free agency. And then you're facing, this is granted, like this is down the road a little bit, 2 years, but you're talking about maxing him out. I like him a lot. I don't know if that would have made sense. So to get this haul of picks, awesome. To get Keldon Johnson locked down to that number, especially like, I mean, with the cap going, even if the cap were staying flat, that's just like an absolute phenomenal signing or phenomenal extension. With it
He's
going up
by Clutch Sports too. I couldn't believe he signed that deal.
It's a joke. I just don't understand how you were able to keep him for so little. And like the big picture thing, I like Sohan a lot. The big picture thing is now like you're in the Victor Wembanyama pole position, or you have the ability
the pole position.
Like that is like you are in position to suck worse than any other team, or at least you're in the mix. They got to be one of those bottom 3 teams, I think, or bottom 4. And like that's just how you flip this around. So, and credit to the Spurs, because the Spurs historically have not done this. Like, and the last time they really did it, it yielded Tim Duncan, and it required some luck. But like this is the time to do it. I'm glad they finally did it. it hurts to lose Murray, but like this, like macro, micro, any way you want to look at this, I think they just did the right stuff.
Yeah, they got an A for me too. I don't know what you would dislike about their offseason. Like I said, unless you think should they've taken someone else at 20 and 25 or even at number 9. I really like the Jeremy Sohan pick. I do think it looks a little bit worse now that Chip Anglin's not there anymore.
Yeah.
I was counting on him to help with the jump shot, but just as someone who's a ball mover, connective tissue on offense, and can defend a whole bunch of different spots on defense, I love the theory of him. And there's just, even let's say the Hawks, it works out for Atlanta, and it might, because DeJounte Murray and Trae Young and Clint Capella and John Collins and Deion, that's a shit ton of talent. But you have all those pick commitments scaling past DeJounte Murray's current contract. That is big. And the other thing is just like, they will be valuable in subsequent trades just as a concept before they even convey. And I think the bigger value here is you clarified your direction and you're not in that middle part of the NBA anymore. And to me, I understand that teams are run as a business and that it's not championship or bust for everybody. But if I'm a fan, this is how I would root for teams. It's how I do root for my teams. That is my goal. I don't care what market I'm in. Like, I want to see them building towards something. And this is why, as a Knicks fan, as a beleaguered Knicks fan, I would rather see them take the long, not circuitous path, but like a long semi-direct route where it's like, oh, they're trying to build something. The Spurs are now clearly doing that. And even if you don't think that their next pole star is on this team, and let's be honest, of Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson, Jeremy Sohan, or Josh Primo are probably the top candidates for that. Their best chance at acquiring a pole star is probably in the future with one of their draft picks. That's fine, because now your draft stock is going to be high enough that you're in the cornerstone territory and you're not constantly relying on these mid to late lottery picks or just mid to late first rounders in general. And the other thing here is just like, maybe you feel differently if DeJounte Murray was willing to sign an extension, but he wasn't, because you had him on a steal of a deal in the first place, that 120% raise in advance of what his max salary would have been. There was no chance he was going to sign a deal. And then you have to start thinking, oh, well, if we're going to pay him all this money, you're kind of capping your ceiling if you weren't able to find that what you needed was DeJounte Murray's functional superior, not even his equal. I think when you get into a conversation about the Wizards with Beal, or maybe even the Bulls with Zach LaVine, you're not necessarily looking, or whatever team lines up with Donovan Mitchell, you're not necessarily looking for a player better than any of them. You want their equal. In the Spurs case with DeJounte Murray, they needed someone who was better than him to really chart that championship course. And so I like everything that they did here. And look, they have not played all the arrows in their quiver just yet. They could be a sneaky Russell Westbrook destination. If they have cap space, they have Josh Richardson, Doug McDermott. If you're the Lakers, look about how much money you save. Would you give up 2 first-round picks for that type of a deal? And you're still conserving your cap space for 2023 for the most part, even though Doug McDermott would be on the books. But I like that the Spurs finally chose a direction. I think the one thing you could look at and say, well, it really feels like this is going to be Greg Popovich's last year. Now we know he's not going to be fielding a competitive team. There's like some, regret there. At the same time, he appears reinvigorated by coaching youngsters. He seems to be loving it. And 2, unless you were going to go all in for Mitchell or be the team that went after Durant, you weren't going to have this team that was worthy of Greg Popovich's last year necessarily.
No, and it's his decision, right? Like he must have signed off on all this, and that's fine. The other thing is too, like the goal, and I think the way they've set themselves up is to be bad, right? But I think like you've still got, just not that this is necessarily a factor in the grade, it's just something I would be concerned about if my team did this. I'm still going to watch, because I really want to see what Josh Primo does with a chance to kind of explore the space. I want to see if Keldon Johnson takes another step. I want to see if Vassell looks like a real 3-and-D, like this is going to be a guy, on the next really great Spurs team. There's what kind of a defender is Sohan going to be against NBA players? Like, is he going to be as good as ever? Is he another piece that's going to be there when Wembanyama is your number one guy and you've got all these guys around him? Is he going to? So like, there's tons of reasons to stay invested, which is like almost never the case in a rebuild that's as thorough as this one looks like it's going to be, or it looks like it already sort of is, because they're set now. Like, even if they don't do anything with all that cap space, which I assume they will, like this is a solid. If we started grading like foundations or like paths forward or like 5 years away power rankings or asset pools, like the Spurs are right there. This is a sweet position to be in. So even one of the worst aspects of this situation, which is normally like an unwatchable product, is just not at play right now. So yeah, I think it's an A, and like I would love to hear the case for less than an A if somebody had one.
Maybe like an A- because they didn't trade Jakob Poeltl or something. Or but like they could still do that and probably will, although maybe he ends up being really cheap and they just keep him. But I'm enamored with where they go from here. And I think, to your point, they're going to be fun to watch. They were last year. They had the fastest average offensive possession time in the league. I will say it wasn't always pretty, but like they're kind of built to play with more speed now. I don't think DeJounte Murray slowed them down by any stretch, but they're like complete anarchy when you look at their pecking order. Like it's Josh Primo. They gave more ball screens to Devin Vassell after the Derek White trade. They really might try and plumb him as a half-court creator now. Jeremy Sohan, I'm assuming, gets a lot of playing time. And he also, I think Malachi Branham should wind up getting more playing time than Blake Wesley. I don't know between them, but Malachi Branham's like sort of that swing prospect where everything could go wrong and he'll look awful, but that's someone who could probably put up points and tough shots in a hurry. I'm just fascinated by what they're doing now. And I think it was probably the overdue call to make, but they made it. And it's important that they did.
And maybe it's timed right, because maybe Wembanyama really is what is as advertised. And maybe this is the year to take your shot. The last thing is, I think too, with Murray, like he was good enough to where you did have to make considerations about the pieces you put around him because of his shooting limitations. And just like, he's an uncommon player, like a primary ball handler that's still just a suspect shooter off the catch and off the bounce, especially, but he's an all-star. So to sort of clean the slate by saying like, we are no longer having to consider, well, do all these other positions have enough shooting to compensate for our primary ball handler being sketchy in that area? Like now you're just best player available all the time. Like that's just, you can just get away with that. So I also like that freedom.
Grant, this was great. Can you tell our listeners where they can find you if they're not watching and can't see your handle or haven't already seen your work?
Yeah, work on your reading comprehension, guys, if you can't. It's GT_Hughes on Twitter, and we'll be doing, I don't know what order you're going to release these in, but we'll be doing a few more of these and keep it going on HardwoodKnocks throughout the offseason.
Grant, thank you so much. As always, if no one has rated, reviewed, or subscribed to us on their podcast players or subscribed on YouTube, please hurry up, go do that immediately. Until next time, and as always, Grant and I leave you with the shout out to the one, the only, the real cornerstone in Dallas, Frank Ntilikina.